Okay, so it's recording.
Okay, hi, I'm Emily Wadham. I am the visual arts teacher and also special education teacher at Mountain Empire High School, and I have been teaching now for 4 years.
Okay. So what is something you find very challenging about your job?
Um, Student motivation is a big one. We actually have, our vice principal has been looking into the subject of grading and how grading can be good and bad and whatnot. And I think that ties in a lot with the student motivation is that, a lot of students are just motivated by, well, I need to turn in this assignment to get a B, or I need to do this and this and this to get an A. And it kind of, as teachers, we hope it would be more like, well, we want to do these assignments and we're interested in completing this work, so we're going to do it, whether or not there's that incentive of grades. And then you get a lot of, I think part of my struggles, especially with art, is that I get a lot of missing assignments in my class because my students aren't motivated to complete the assignments because they're not their interest is low because they have to take art as an elective, not because they want to take it. So all of my students that really enjoy art and are interested in the subject, they pretty much always get an A, maybe a B if they forget to do sketchbook homework. But then I have a lot of students that get put in my class to get the art elective checked off their list, and they don't care about the subject. And then they start failing my class and not turning stuff in, and then there's classroom management issues involved. So, trying to keep students motivated is very challenging. I'm trying to figure out what they're all interested in and stuff. So yeah.
So going with what you were saying about grading, how does that work with art? How do you grade art?
Well, I did my entire master's thesis on this, and the answer is it's pretty objective or subjective. For the most part, I think it's been kind of agreed in research literature and from the art teachers that I talked to that rubrics seem to be the best form of grading for art, because essentially, there are standards for art classes. If a student is going into an art career or just something related to the arts, there are things that they should be able to do and be able to know. So we have, as a teacher, we have these goals to get to, and assigning work and attaching rubrics to that seems to be the best way, because then we can tell them exactly what we're looking for. So, I do a perspective project where it's very mathematical, very logical, and you have to use a ruler and use clean lines. And I tell them on my rubric that craftsmanship and neatness count more, because that's what I'm trying to assess them on. For abstract art, messiness doesn't matter, craftsmanship doesn't really matter, so I grade them on creativity. That's rubrics are great, but then teachers do also get bogged down in for me, I do sketchbook homework once a week, and my thought behind assigning the sketchbook homework was that the more practice you get in art, the better you become. Even if you start out not even knowing how to draw a stick figure, if you just keep working at it, you do eventually get better, even if you're just tracing or whatever. But whether it's because they don't care or they don't have time or whatnot, a lot of students miss the sketchbook homework. And does it really affect their ability in class in the long run? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. But that affects their grade. And is that fair? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out. So yeah, it's complicated. I didn't answer your question at all.
It's complicated. That's an answer.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your least enjoyable part of the job?
Paperwork and grading. It's like I said, it's, I assign worksheets, I assign sketchbook work, I assign classwork, and I feel like I tend to do better as a teacher, and my students tend to be more responsive if I'm able to give them immediate feedback. If you do a worksheet and do okay on it, but then you turn it in, then they don't care about it anymore. It's like, okay, well, I did the assignment, cool. There's no thought about, where can I improve? Let's look at what I did and what I can do better. It's just kind of like, okay, I did this, it's turned in, let's move on to the next one. So sometimes I kind of feel like grading tends to be a waste of time, because it's most of the time I'm marking off, did they do the assignment or did they not do the assignment? And sometimes it's, did they do it well or did they not do it well? But for the most part, at least in Art 1, I tell my students that if you're willing to try and put yourself out there, even if the end result isn't good, which is subjective in itself, I'm still going to give you credit, because art it's very open-ended.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't like that. I'd like to just pass all of my kids and go into some kind of like art apprenticeship thing, but it's not realistic. So yeah.
All right. What would you say is your favorite teaching style?
So it kind of depends on the level. I would say for beginning art, I really like doing the teacher shows kids do, and then they get to explore, right? So I'll show them how to draw something, they practice it, and then they have a classwork assignment that involves practicing it more, and then I get to go around and see what they're doing, and where I can help and point things in the right direction. So I really like that aspect. I don't like to be up lecturing in front of the classroom most of the time. I prefer to let them try stuff, and then I'm there to tell them, okay, well, this looks off, and I'll show you why, and let me do this and that. And but then for Art 2 and AP, we get into more like philosophical discussions. Like when we look at street art, it's like, what counts as graffiti? What counts as art? Are they both the same thing? Are they not the same thing? What even is art? And I love those kind of discussions, but it's not till their second or third year that the students normally feel open enough to actually talk about it. But I've had like circles before that have been really awesome.
Okay. So what do you use for classroom and behavior management?
I don't, I don't know. I'm pretty lenient about stuff. For the most part, if I have a student that's disruptive or causing issues, I will take them out to the hallway or the back room and talk to them a few times before I start writing them up and sending them to the office and stuff. Occasionally, if it's a group of students together, I will create a seating chart for the whole class that separates those students. So they're not feeding off of each other, and that typically solves a lot of problems. And more than that, I mean, I'm pretty lenient on phones, so I don't really normally have a pushback on that. There's been a couple times where I've had to call the office and just be like, hey, can you come get so-and-so? They're not listening to me. But I'm very casual about it. I don't get angry. I don't take it personally. It's whatever's going on in this kid's life right now, whether it's me or something else, he is not, or she is not they're disrupting the class, so let's get them out of here. But there's a lot of talking and stuff first. And then the only other thing that I can think of that I really use is that sometimes when I have like a very squirrely class, I'll use hand gestures to get their attention. So last year I had a class that just devolved into chaos really quickly, and so anytime I needed their attention again, I would go up in the front of the classroom and be like, yeah, like rock on. And then I had to teach them what that meant, but basically I was like, all right, when I put this up, you put this up, and when your arm is up, your mouth's closed. Simple instructions. And for the most part, that tended to work, because one kid would do it and the other kid would be like, hey, okay, and then that would work. So yeah.
Okay. Do you do anything different between like art class and like special ed?
Well, I don't teach, like I don't have a special ed class. I had study skills for my first 2 years, but right now it's like co-teaching, but I also tend to pull out groups of students to work with them in more of like a one-on-one individual basis. Um, so yeah.
Okay. How do you have your students seated? And then why do you feel this is the best configuration?
So the way that I have it, I have really long tables and then I have stools for the students to sit on. So it's basically like 3 stools per table. So I have it set up where um, my desk and the whiteboard is in the front of the room. And then there's a big long U around the outside of the room, and then 2 tables facing the front on the inside of the room. Previously, I only had the U, but my classes have been getting bigger, so I had to add the tables in the middle to fit another 6 or 7 students. But I really like this because they're all, for the most part, facing the front. So that when I need them to be paying attention to me, I don't have to worry about kids turning in their seats or looking like across the table at a classmate, because I don't let anyone sit on the inside of the U,
Hmm.
so they're not like facing anybody necessarily.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's really the main part of the setup is it allows me to walk through and look at what the students are doing. So they're on one side of the table and I can come over on this side of the table and see what they're working on. So I can go, oh, wait, that's not, you should do that here instead of here. Or, hey, that color looks really great. So it's really great for providing feedback.
Okay. Have you had a very difficult situation with any particular students, and how did you handle it?
I've had a couple. My first year, my first year was a little rough. I had a whole class period that was known as the nightmare group at the high school, that they kind of just bounced off of each other. But there's one student in particular that was kind of the whole like leader of said group. And so that was a really hard class to manage, especially in my first year, where I didn't really know what I was doing and what worked and what didn't work. And I almost kind of came on too strict in the beginning, because I started off with, you have your phone out, I'm going to take it. Or like, if you don't put it away, instead of being like, hey, can you put your phone away? I said it once. If I say it again, I'm actually going to take it. Okay, thanks. Like it's like the tone of voice is a lot different. And I jumped to using referrals a lot sooner. Like, you need to get to your seat. And he would ignore me because he was talking to a friend, and then be like, okay, I'm going to write you up now. And it's like, I've since learned that, I should take the student out, ask them what's going on. And if they're still combative or whatever, then I get the admin and security involved to help with that situation. But this student would throw pencils in my ceiling. He would, at the beginning of class, because I used to have like really awful stools and there were good stools and bad stools, he would
Hmm.
run across the whole room, jump over tables, which is a huge like safety issue, and then like grab a stool like out from under his friend's butt because he wanted that stool. And it was like so disruptive and so like just out of control. And I had a hard time trying to figure out how to handle that. And then my principal was like, well, call the family and see if you can get them to help. And then I called, and his dad chewed me out over the phone for something that was not even remotely related to me.
Hmm.
um, and then I eventually got admin to help. And, I after digging a little deeper, I realized that it didn't really have anything to do with me, and a lot of what was going on at home with the student and family issues that just translated to acting out at everywhere. Because I was not the only teacher that had an issue with this student too. So we had a couple meetings, like a 504 meeting, to not only talk about the student's grades because he was failing, but also his behavior. And the dad got involved, and it was kind of really sad to see how he treated his son. And then after that, I was a lot more compassionate about it. And I think that kind of like, it was a tough case, but I think it made a little bit of a difference because he seemed to calm down a little bit after I finally like just took him outside and talked to him. I think at one really bad day, I was like, I'm not sure what's going on, but would you rather just sit out here in the hallway for a little bit? And he was like, yes. And he did. He didn't go wandering or anything like can sometimes happen. So yeah, that
Okay.
get your admin to help.
All right. Is your classroom culturally diverse?
I'd say so. Yeah.
Okay. What kind of things do you do to incorporate a little bit of cultural diversity in your classroom?
Okay. So I'm not the best at this. I've been sitting on whether or not I should include more art history in general in my class because I'm not the best at doing art history, so that we can study like Latino artists like Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, who are big names, but you don't really hear a lot of them outside of Hispanic culture. And there's a lot of like, go to Mexico, there's tons of beautiful murals, and that's a whole thing and stuff. So I don't do that yet, but I still leave my projects open-ended enough that the students can put into their work what's important to them. So when I assign projects, I don't pick very specific topics. I leave it a little bit more open and go, okay, like, here's the skill that I'm looking at, like value drawing or painting or whatever. You pick the subject matter and the topic and what you want to do. And that's kind of how it works for me right now.
Okay. What is one of your favorite ways to connect subject matter to real life contexts?
So one of the things that I tried last year that I stopped doing after a while, and I think I'll pick it up again, is I did Modern Art Mondays. So for a warm-up every Monday, I would project a current working artist and have them look at a painting and talk about it and what they think about it and stuff and write it in their sketchbook. But I like to include that in my like unit lessons, and it happens more in art 2. I would say art 1 is a lot more technical skill based, let's teach you how to draw and paint. And then art 2 is like, let's really look at what art is and what artists there are. So the real life connections start taking place in art 2 when we look at artists that do street art. We look at recycle artists. We look again at abstract a little bit, and they get to see a lot more current art, I think. And then they're able to really think about like, well, that really applies to what's going on right now. Like for art 2, their street art assignment kind of coincided with election time. So there was a few pieces where they focused on that, and that was pretty cool. So yeah.
How do you build relationships with parents and the students' families?
I like to try to do a lot of community stuff related to art. This past year especially, I've been starting to try after school events that the parents can participate in, because previously I would do just the art shows, which would be open for people to visit, and I would get families, but I wouldn't get a lot of families. So I started doing like a paint night where you buy a ticket, and and it's for adults and their students if the students want to participate, and they buy the ticket and they do the event, and it helps me form a stronger connection than if I was just to like, I don't know, call home or something. So I'm definitely working on getting the community involvement in the arts because there's a lot of potential there.
Okay. How do you build your relationships with the students?
A lot of chatting. The really nice thing about my class and how it's set up is that the students have a lot of independent work time in my room, and that's typically the time where I really get to know my students. I'll walk around and ask them how they're doing. I'll comment on their work. And then a lot of times I'm very frank about what my interests and hobbies are. I'll talk about video game stuff all the time. I talk about art stuff. I talk about my cats all the time, and just sharing that aspect of myself as a teacher with them tends to get them to open up more too. And I learn about a student whose cat just had a baby and they tell me all about it. And I run video game clubs, so a student might tell me in class they just got a new game the other day that they're really excited to play. So yeah.
Like, so what about your coworkers? What have you found helps create relationships with them?
I actually think our principal and our vice principal are really awesome in this aspect, because we have once a month we have meetings in the morning, but then we also have a lot of kind of like optional staff connection stuff to do. So we'll have dress up days, we have the meetings, we have like bowling get-togethers, and like a few outside of school things that are optional. But it kind of, by putting these things together, it really helps connect us more, because like when we're at school during the meetings, we're talking about work and lessons and plans and students and that kind of stuff. But like every year, twice a year after finals, our principal puts together a bowling event that the teachers can go to, where we all relax after getting all of our grading done and hang out and bowl and stuff. So I think the admin really encourages us to all get together and know each other a little bit better. During the meetings, there is a good amount of, not like the cheesy icebreakers, but there's things like, oh, talk to so-and-so about how your weekend went, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Okay. How do you take care of yourself so that you don't get burnt out?
Well, aside from playing a lot of video games to pretend that life doesn't exist, and taking a lot of baths, no, I try to make sure that I don't take work home. I make sure that work life and home life maintain a clear separation, so that I don't get too crazy. Like, I still sometimes will have to take project samples home to finish and stuff, and I might have some lesson planning or like a slideshow to make it home, but I don't bring any grading home or anything, because it's just, if you work yourself too hard, you're going to burn out. So you have to understand that you are a human and you only have so many hours in the day, and there's only so much you can do. So if you only got half of your to-do list done for the day, that's fine. Do the rest of it tomorrow. If you can't finish it tomorrow, do it the next day or something. Like, it's harder for first year teachers, because then you have to come up with brand new curriculum and deal with stuff. So, but for the most part, I think it's important to be okay with not getting stuff done, as long as it's not a lesson that you're teaching the next day, which has happened.
So going in with that, how do you stay organized?
Google Docs helps a lot. I have a lot of folders. But it really helps me keep track. Like, I have a folder for each class, and then I have a folder for each unit, and then I also have a folder for those one-offs. Like, I have an extra credit folder, and then I have a folder for that like 1 week long project that we do, and that. So I have a lot of like, everything has a place inside my virtual Google binder. But then I also have a backup binder that has all of my lessons, typically in order of how I would teach them throughout the year. And this is also where I keep my physical examples. So if we're doing block prints in November, I can just go to the November tab and pull the project out right there. Mm-hmm. And then my counselor friend has told me that I should also be switching this to digital, but I use written calendars. Every month I print out a calendar with boxes for each of my classes, and I will write out what I'm doing for that week. Or if I'm really prepared, I'll plan it out for the whole month. And I do it in pencil because I do need to adjust. You know, one year art one will take 5 days to do scratchboard. Next year they'll take 3 days, and then I can move things up a little bit. But I think that the calendar is the biggest thing that keeps me organized, because it reminds me of what's coming up. And it's visual. It's on my desk at all times or behind my desk. So if I'm like, wait, what were we going to do? Or if I have a student that's like, I'm going to be gone next week on vacation. What are we doing? I'm like, calendar. And it makes things so easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That probably makes it easy for if a sub has to come in for you, right? Just look at what you want to do for that day.
Yeah. Well, we also have to type out our sub plans and email them to the front desk person every day, and she prints them out, puts them on the table. But it is helpful to remind myself, like, because I'll do field trips and stuff. So I did GamerCon last year, and I planned it out like 2 months in advance. But then on the calendar, the day of, it's like sub plans. And then a couple weeks out, I look at my calendar. I'm like, oh yeah, I still have to make sub plans for next Friday. Like, shoot. So.
All right. So what's the best advice you have been given about teaching?
There's two, I think. The first one is that after 3 years, it gets easier. So don't give up right away. Every person that I talked to when I was first starting out was basically like, that was it. Your first year of teaching, your second year of teaching, even maybe your third year of teaching are going to be so much work. And it's going to be really hard because you have to figure out how you do stuff. You have to figure out your curriculum. You have to figure out what your students are like. And so there's a lot. But from experience, I was there, and it does get a lot better. Like, this past year was my 4th year. Oh man, was it a breeze compared to the other ones. So definitely at least try a few years before you give up, because it does get better, and you do form really strong connections with students along the way. And then you're like, oh yeah, like, I have a group of seniors right now that are graduating. And I've had them since I started. I've had them for 3 years, but some of them were my first year teaching. And like, the letters and the gifts and stuff that I've been getting, I've been like bawling my face off. And at their graduation, I've been bawling my face off because I love these kids so much. And 4 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought that was possible. I was just, oh yeah, cute teenagers, So, give yourself time to form connections. And I guess that ties into the other part of the teaching advice is like, there's a lot of not mental health stuff, but like conferences and things that I've gone to. And a lot of the times their biggest thing is like, you have to form connections to your students in order for them to really become invested in your class. And I really have seen that. The students that I talk to all the time that are in my clubs and stuff, they're the ones that do really well. And the ones that I don't know very well and aren't really comfortable talking to me and reaching out to me, like, they'll do well sometimes, but those also tend to be the kids that don't really do well. So partially so that your students get invested in you and what you're teaching, and partly for your personal sanity, like, you really do need to form those connections and treat them like individuals and not like, oh God, this is my class of 30 kids. Let's get this over with.
Okay. Is there anything you wish to have known your first year of teaching?
That it's not a bad thing to call the office. You're not a terrible teacher if you need help. And that it gets easier, and that some kids you just won't connect with. Some kids won't like you, and that's not personal. I mean, it isn't, but you shouldn't take it personally if they don't like you. And then some kids will love you, and it's great.
All right. What is the worst lesson you have taught?
Um, so the absolute worst lesson that I taught is my first year of teaching. I was trying to diversify the kind of art I was showing them a little bit. And NC Escher is my dad's favorite artist. So I was like, oh man, he's super cool, freaky. Let's do a lesson on NC Escher. And it started off kind of cool, like, you know, oh, look at the optical illusions and look at this and that. And so like the introduction part was fine. But then we got to the project part and I had them make see, I don't even remember what it's called anymore. The tessellations. There we go. I had them make tessellations. And then I did, being my first year of teaching, I was coming up with a lot of stuff, not on the fly, but like a week beforehand. So I'd done a sample project that weekend and I'd followed some directions from an online guide on how to do it. And I was like, oh yeah, I got this. It's totally fine. And then when I went to go teach them, it was awful. It was like, for some reason my sample project pattern worked, but anything the students did was like it didn't fit together, or like they cut it wrong and I couldn't figure out how to fix it because it's very mathematical and logical and that's not really where I'm strong. And then I couldn't answer some of their questions when things went wrong. And so it was kind of this horrible combination of I didn't know what I was doing, which kind of meant I wasn't like you need to teach what you're passionate about. And so when you're not like, when you're like, okay, this is like mathematical stuff that I hate math, but I guess I'll do it for the students. Like they could pick up on that. And they knew that I didn't really like this project. So they didn't care about the project. And then as a first year teacher, not being able to troubleshoot and fix things that went wrong, I felt like I was a terrible teacher. Which, you know, if I did it again, that's, it is fine to not know what you're doing. But I just felt like, you know, I should be the expert in the classroom and this is so embarrassing. But it, you know, it was bad. I haven't taught it again.
All right. So flip side of that, what would you say is the best lesson you've ever taught?
So for the most part, in Art 1, I do abstract, which is my favorite, because I'm all about color and color theory and mental stuff. So I'll go over advertising and how marketing uses colors to mess with your brain. I'll go over ecology, and we'll go over interior design. Like yellow rooms make you feel happier because they're more joyful, and red rooms seem really bright and aggressive because red, and you know, sometimes people want that because they want to feel energized. And if you want to calm a room down, you use like a really light blue and that kind of stuff. And then also because it tends to be one of the projects where I don't have to grade technical so much. So I get to see more of what the kids can do with their creativity, like what colors and shapes and techniques can they combine? Are they doing splatter stuff? And then part of that unit is Jackson Pollock. And I have these big canvases and I'll take the kids outside one at a time while the other ones are working on their abstract painting. And I'll hand them, or I'll let them choose a color of paint from like a house paint can. And I hand them a stick or a paintbrush or a cup. And I go, put some of this on that canvas and let me know when you're done. And there's a big tarp all around too, which there's some paint on the floor outside my classroom and it's not my fault. But it's really fun. And the kids get like, some of them don't know what to do. They like pick up the stick and they're like, okay, am I done? I'm like, do you feel done? They're like, I don't know. And it's just, that part is fun. And then some kids will shove their entire hand into the paint can and like throw things everywhere. So it's one of my more fun lessons, I think. And then I also, with AP art this year, it's a brand new class that I was teaching. I brought in, I did a small mini unit on gesture drawing, and I had one of my teacher friends come in during that class period and do like 4 or 5 different poses, and the students would only have 3 or 4 minutes to draw the teacher before she changed poses. And it was really cool because the kids were super receptive to it. They thought it was so much fun. And it was really funny to not only tease my teacher friend because she couldn't move, but also watch the kids work, because you set the timer and then it goes dead quiet and they're like, And then the end results, because gesture drawing is all about loose and focusing on the shape and the movement, not really the details. So some of them end up looking kind of funny, and it's interesting to see how that turns out too. So yeah.
So how has like the distance teaching been going since all this COVID stuff?
I mean, in some cases it's been good, but I think it's been kind of more negative overall. Um, I had to kind of on the fly reimagine what my lessons look like. So I ended up, because we're a rural district, some of our students don't have internet. Some of our students don't have art supplies. They only have like pen and paper. Some of them do. Some of them have a full set of paints and want to do stuff. And so there's a ton of variables. So I ended up creating 6 projects a week, and they would choose from that list 2 of them to do. And I would always make sure that I had at least 2 options that could be done with a pencil and no internet. So stuff like, here's an article on abstract, because I didn't get to teach it this year. You know, read the article and write a paragraph about what you think and what you learned. And some of it was like, stuck at home, do you have baking soda and cornstarch? You can make your own clay, like, you know, crazy stuff. So on one hand, I think I was actually able to come up with some new projects that were more fun and creative, and they're more in the arts and crafts area, but I had to make sure that they were easy enough that the students could do it by following typed up directions. So in response to that, I've had a steady, 15 to 20 students turn in those assignments each week. And it's been really awesome to see what they come up with, because I feel like for some reason, these ones have been able to pull out a little more personality than my other assignments have. Like, I challenged them to the Getty challenge the other week, and I had 8 students participate, and it was amazing. I was like, wow, this is really smart. I never would have thought of that, and it's really cool.
What's
So on
the
one,
Getty challenge?
oh, sorry, yeah. You take a classic artwork, like a painting or a photograph or whatever, and you recreate it with the stuff that you have at home, because everybody's stuck at home and can't leave. And it's called the Getty Challenge because the Getty Museum kind of started it, and they started the hashtag and stuff.
Okay.
So, but then on the other hand, it's participation has been really low. Like, I'm not counting AP. So Art 1 and Art 2, I have about 50 students total. And I was only getting about 20 students turning stuff in every week. And some of them would only turn in 1 out of 2. So that was kind of sucky. And some of it was surprising, because like, students that were really awesome in my class and were super interested in everything, I haven't heard from since March. But then I also, I have no idea what's going on in their lives. And
Yeah.
I have to remember that too, is they could be taking care of siblings, their parents could be out of work and having horrible fights. So I don't know. So I personally don't think distance learning can work without some kind of accountability on the student part. I could do videos, I could show them how to do stuff, but if they're not going to pull up the video and watch it, then there's no point.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of students weren't doing that. But it's also the end of the school year, and it's crazy, and if I was home, I'd probably procrastinate too. So, I mean, I am home and I did kind of procrastinate, but I still got all of my assignments out into my students on Mondays. And that's what I noticed too, is at the high school level, our office hours were optional. So I would set up a Zoom meeting every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, from 8:30 to 9:30, and I would sit at my computer and wait for students to come on and ask questions and show me what they did and just talk to me like I talk to them in the classroom. And like the first couple weeks, I got 3 or 4 students, and after week 3, I've gotten absolutely nobody on. So it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But you know, it's complicated.
Yeah. All right. So the last question I have for you is, why do you teach?
Well, to be totally honest, in the beginning, um, I went into graphic design a little bit as a career and then realized that I hate working with customers. So then I was sat down and I was like, what job can I do that I can still do art but help people? And then my sisters were teachers and they were like, be a teacher. And I was like, me, teacher? Yeah, right. But then I was like, okay, well, that's kind of my only option, so I'm going to do it. So, it kind of started off as like, I just wanted to find a career in art that I could still do without having to do ridiculous amount of training and also deal with customers and ridiculous demands. Um, but then like as I started working with students, I started really getting that connection. And one of the things too that I thought about after my sisters mentioned the teaching is that in high school I had kind of a rough time at home, and it was my art teachers that helped me get out of my shell. They were like I'm not going to go into it, but basically my teachers were the ones that were like, you're so, you're really talented. This is amazing. You can absolutely do this. Like, maybe let's look at what would happen if you did this and why don't you explore that? And they're the ones that really pushed me to challenge myself. And it made a huge difference growing up. And so I appreciated that so much from them. And I was like, I could be that for somebody else. Like I could try to be that awesome mentor that really supports somebody. And so that was a goal going in. And like I said, my year 3 students I've had the same group of kids for 3 years, and they all stuck together in the same class. So there's 12 of them. And then now all 12 of them are graduating together. And it's like, I'm crying and they're crying. And it's just like that emotional connection is just out of control. And I didn't think in the beginning that would be something that would happen. But now it's totally like, I'm really heartbroken that my seniors are leaving, but I'm also looking forward to meeting my new students next year and seeing how that's going to happen again. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of my sophomores and juniors that I started a connection with and that I can keep building that next year. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today. All right. And, all right. I got to figure out how to stop the recording. Hold on.
Stop the recording.
Yeah, figure that out. Stop. There we go.
Says it's